But the fourth navigator that is the goal to continually like migrate back towards is aware and curious. And that one is the seeker, right? That's where we can lead with curiosity. That's where we can lead with composure. So those stories we have, a lot of times it's not about being aware of them. It's about being like, which navigator is getting chatty right now? And how can I shift that narrative more into the seeker?
Welcome to Breakthrough Mode, the podcast where we intentionally get into the driver's seat of our lives, shift out of monotony and mediocrity, and step on the gas towards becoming the person we were always meant to become. Hello and welcome to episode 267 on the Breakthrough Mode podcast. I am your host, Megan Bauer. Thank you so much for joining me and pushing play on today's episode. Today, I have a treat for you. I have John Mollura here with us. He has spent 15 years leading mission-critical field testing, supporting NASA and elite U.S. military units where precision and real-world execution mattered every single day. Today, he's a leadership coach and a keynote speaker. He helps leaders cut through mental noise, sharpen focus, and take decisive action under pressure. He's coached over 400 high-performing professionals and delivered keynotes across the U.S., and I have him here to chat with us today. And as we were chatting previously about his Elite Action Framework, his Navigator's Masterclass, and his HITS method, one thing really struck me over and over again, and that was this idea about awareness and how critical it was. And so I decided to bring John here with us today to chat about this critical piece that I feel like gets tossed around, but often overlooked.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for having me here, Megan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So when it comes to awareness, when we were chatting before, it was like, well, you have to be aware that you're doing this or thinking this or whatever. And how do we even start that piece? How does that even get started?
Yeah, because without awareness, nothing else matters, right? Like all the frameworks, all the books, all the things that we learn, like unless we're aware of what we want to change, none of that matters. So there's one word, it's intentionality. So when we were leading up to this conversation today, we were thinking like, if you're not aware of these things, how do we even make a difference here? Well, hopefully this episode is going to be the first step to give people just a pause to think about where are some areas in my life that are either going well and I want to level up in, or maybe what are the areas in my life where things aren't happening the way that I wanted them to? And how can I bring awareness in and start to just dissect those and move forward?
Right. So what I heard you say was pause.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the thing that is so difficult in this day and age, because anytime I see a moment of pause for people when I'm, out in the world observing, they're on their phone.
Yeah.
That's not a pause.
No.
That's a distraction. So this piece then, it sounds like it's that moment of pause and sitting with it. I was also wondering as I was considering this too, because you mentioned like the things that aren't going well, would pain be an indicator of when you need to pause?
Yeah, so pausing is not something that a lot of folks that are really trying to get a lot done. Like I know, your audience, like, their schedules are full, right? They're managing a lot. And so the thought of like stopping whenever we already have so much on our plate a lot of times seems very counterintuitive. But
Right.
we can also look at it as addition by subtraction. Like maybe it isn't about doing the next thing. Maybe the next thing is just hitting the brakes or building some intentional time to just think about what is the right next step. Because movement doesn't always equal progress.
Mm, yes, that's true. I'll let that land for a minute. Movement does not always equal progress. So if we don't take the time to pause and set that intentionality, we
Hmm.
run the risk of just being busy.
Yeah,
And
yeah, just running.
yeah, and I would say those are the days where you end and you're like, what did I even do today?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So having that intentionality, and it goes much bigger than like what's the next right step. Like that's the way we make progress. But we do need some time to sit and find our North Star. Like where do we really want to go to? Like
Hmm.
with our relationships, with our finances, with our, whatever it looks like, how you fill your day, whether you're working or whether you're managing a home, a business, like whatever that is, like where do we want to go? Like setting that North Star with intentionality, because you're right. If we're just going through the days and going through the motions, you hit, the end of the day and we're exhausted. And you're
Yeah,
like, I'm not really sure what I did today, but I know I did something, but it didn't necessarily move the needle forward towards where you wanna go. So, spending some time to sit with where do you really wanna go in your life? And those are big questions, and they can a lot of times trip people up, but, we're great at making things overly complicated, right? We want the
yes.
final draft the first time we sit down and write out, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So it's a moment of recognizing like it's okay. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Like if we have that mindset, like I got to have this all figured out before I even try to figure it out. Well, that's where we just get stuck and stalled out. So I just
Right.
encourage people like just start small and then just start refining it, because once you start activating your mind, like where do I want to go? It's gonna engage the reticular activation system in your brain, and that's the part of your brain that just picks up on stuff, right?
Right.
Like if you decided you want to buy, I always say, like if you want to buy like a blue Jeep, you've made your mind up. I'm buying a blue Jeep. Well, wouldn't you know? It's like I didn't know there were so many blue Jeeps out on the road. I see them everywhere. That's
Yeah.
your reticular activation system, and
Right.
if we apply that towards where we want to go in life, we can really then start having that part of our brain running in the background.
Yes, and helping us out by
For
seeing
sure.
the opportunities, by seeing, creative solutions and,
Mhm.
it actually gets to kick in and help us out once we set that North Star. So you've
Absolutely.
done a lot of really cool things, like literally rocket science, a lot of really admirable things. So as somebody on the outside would think that you've just been intentional your entire life.
Right.
But knowing human nature, tell us about how maybe realized that you weren't being as aware and intentional with what you were doing with your life and what that shift was like for you when you actually kind of stepped into that awareness and decided what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go.
Oh yeah, I have no shortage of examples of when I was not intentional in my life. I always say like, for probably the first half of my life, I pretty much Forrest Gumped my way through life. Like I just kind of bounced from one thing to another. Like I would love to sit here and tell your audience that, oh yeah, ever since I fell in love with Star Wars in the 1980s, I had my mindset on going to engineering school and working in the space program. That'd be total false. Like that wouldn't. And what happened was the way I wound up where I was I wasn't I would say yes to many things. A lot of things I was probably, somewhat unqualified for in the moment, but knew I didn't know how to do it, so I enlisted the trust of mentors and, guides along the way. And one of the biggest pivotal moments was when I was in college, I had plans to work at Disney over the summer as one of their Imagineers, right? It was down to me and one other person. Long story short, I lost the job. I didn't get it. They selected the other person. So I took a job working at all things at a Boy Scout camp. Right? I wasn't a Boy
Okay.
Scout. Yeah. Because one of my fraternity brothers saw I was real bummed out. He walked in my room as soon as I got rejected, and he's like, "You all right?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay." And I told him what happened. He said, "All right, well, you're outdoorsy. Why don't you come work at the Boy Scout camp?" I'm like, "Well, I got no other better option." Sure, why not? I'll do that. And that I fell into being the director of rock climbing there. Not because I knew how to rock climb, but because I was so miserable doing what I was hired to do, working on the maintenance staff, right? And like my job,
Mhm.
like we're always very unglamorous on the maintenance staff. Like I was like scrubbing propane tanks, getting the rust off them, pulling dead mice out of toilets. Like those were the level of jobs that me, unskilled labor had. So they said, "Hey, do you want to be rock climbing director?" I said, "Yes." And they said, "Do you know how to rock climb?" I said, "No, but you're going to teach me, right?" And they said, "Yeah, we'll send you to training. Are you scared of heights?" I said, "Sure am. When do I leave?" So, and ironically, the reason why I told that story is because, there were a lot of like saying yeses there, like opportunities popped up. And, a lot of them were, I was so miserable where I was like, I'll do whatever. I'll do whatever it is to get out of this stage right here. And that's something that I've really held on to, that I try not to let desperation be my inspiration anymore. Like I try not
Ooh,
to let myself to get to that level of desperation where it's like I need to be inspired now. I'm so miserable. It's
right.
powerful, but it's not sustainable and we don't want to stay there. So being rock climbing is actually what got me the job in the space program because I w- I struggled in school. Looking back on it, the diagnosis of like extreme like ADD that I had got as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's why school was so hard. So I struggled in school, but eventually graduated. And the company that hired me, the person that hired me saw a rock climbing director on the resume. And he was former special forces. He led all the testing for all these NASA programs. And he hired me. And I said to him after we were out in the field one time doing testing, I said, "Why'd you hire me?" I said, "I'm not super smart. Like my grades aren't great." And he said, and he was this grizzled old special forces guy from like Vietnam era. He goes, "I don't need another beep beep egghead around here." He said, "I need someone that is smart enough that I know I can send out into the field and figure things out and not get themselves killed." He's like, "That's you." So that's how I wound up working in the space program. So it wasn't that I had the intention of wanting to do that, but I kept saying yes, and unfortunately let desperation be my inspiration throughout a lot of that. So that's like the flip side to where I am now, where I try to be very intentional. Do things always
Right.
go according to plan? Absolutely not. But at least it's like, okay, let me pick my head up. Am I going to be able to, reroute to get to that North Star? Or do I need to reevaluate what that North Star means now, as my kids are getting older?
Right. Yeah, and I want to like call attention to this too, that because sometimes we feel like, oh, so much of my life has already passed and I haven't been intentional and now it's just all screwed up. But everything adds up.
Mhm.
Somehow, even when we aren't intentional, even when we're reactionary, everything always adds up for our benefit should we choose to see it that way. This yes, that maybe wasn't an intentional aligned yes led to another yes that maybe wasn't intentional or
Right.
aligned, but it all added up to where you are now in a space where you can be more intentional and aligned. So I love bringing that out for people that everything adds up, even the things that
Mhm.
we classify as no thanks, all adds up for us. So I love that story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And when I left engineering, to touch on that about everything adding up, I left engineering over 9 years ago and turned my side hustle of photography into a commercial photography business. And people are like, "Oh man, I can't believe you're starting over." And I was like, "I'm not starting over." They're like, "Well, yeah, you are." I'm like, "On the business side, yes, but I have like 40 years of skills I've acquired that now I can just reapply differently." So if you're out there and like Megan said, if you feel like I haven't been intentional, I screwed it up, whatever story that inner critic is telling you, like they're a liar, that inner critic. And I want to encourage you, like you're never starting over. It's just
Right.
figuring out how to reapply all this life experiences you had. Because the cool part is you're the only one with that life experience, and that's what the world needs.
Right. Yeah. I love that. It all adds up for you. It's all a part of who you are and how you show up in your way with your perspective and your special skills. Because I can feel very similarly too of like, "Oh, I've done so many random things that now, like, I'm starting over," you know? You can
Yeah.
definitely adopt that should you choose to. Um, yes. So that kind of brings us to like being aware of what your mental stories are, what you're
Mhm.
telling yourself about your past, your capabilities, what your future looks like. So how do you start to become aware of that?
Well, I'm pretty sure we're all aware of those voices that we have chattering in our head. So now the trick is to separate the facts from the stories that those voices tell us. So, the master class that you mentioned, it's called the Navigator's Master Class, and that's what its entire core is about, is identifying like which voice in your head is navigating your life. And it'll float between, the drifter, which is the one that kind of avoids responsibility and, likes the shiny objects. And when things get hard, it's like, let's go see what's over here. That's the drifter. That's when we're just on autopilot and curious. And then, if you go to the other side, then there's the blamer. They're on autopilot, but they're very judgmental, right? And they have their stories they're telling you. And most of those stories are what's happening to us, and what's the use? The world is against us, when the blamer gets really loud. And then there's a third one, the critic, which I've already mentioned. The critic, unfortunately, is aware. Like we've talked a lot about awareness already. The critic's very aware, but the critic is also judgmental, right? And the critic will just stall you out and make you feel pretty crummy about yourself. But the fourth navigator that is the goal to continually like migrate back towards is aware and curious. And that one is the seeker, right? That's where we can lead with curiosity. That's where we can lead with composure. So those stories we have, a lot of times it's not about being aware of them. It's about being like, which navigator is getting chatty right now? And how can I shift that narrative more into the seeker?
Right. I loved that masterclass because it was very clearly presented like all of these are within all of us all of the time.
Hmm.
And we get to choose who has the microphone or who's driving the bus, like
Right.
we get to choose where we're going to act from, who we're going to listen to, and at the same time, who we're going to ignore. Because n- the other, the flamer, the drifter, and the critic, they aren't very helpful to get us to where we want to go. And so they're not the voices to listen to. They're not the person to put in the driver's seat.
Absolutely not. And the question I get a lot is like, okay, great, that's awesome, John. Now what do I do? Well, when the drifter starts getting chatty, where we're just kind of aimlessly wondering, it's like, okay, let me pause and like, what's something I can do right now for like a minute to help me move the needle forward? Because the
Mm,
drifter's all about just like kind of going off target and meandering away. But if we're intentional about it, if we're aware when the drifter's taken over, like, what can I do for like a minute and set a timer on your phone to get myself back on course? When the blamer takes over, interrupting it and saying, like, hang on a second. Yes, things feel like they're completely spiraling out of control right now. But what's one thing I can control right now? Can I control making that phone call? Can I control putting my phone away for 5 minutes and giving myself some peace of mind? Right? Like, we're never
yeah.
as out of control as that blamer would like us to believe, because whenever we adopt that blamer mentality, we also shed responsibility. And that's not where we want to be.
Yeah.
Right. And
It's
then
a
finally,
powerless place.
yeah, yeah. And that just begets feeling more and more powerless, and away we go. And then the critic, you know, the dear critic that lives inside all of us, we need to recognize the critic's actually trying to help in its own unique, very unhelpful way. The critic is trying to stop us from making a fool of ourselves and getting ourselves ostracized, right? That's the critic's job. It just sometimes gets too amplified and catastrophizes too much. So when the critic gets real chatty, the way to shift out of that is to, again, be aware and call it, say, time out. Like, what would I actually say to a friend? in this position. For instance, like let's say, you own a business and the marketing campaign you had didn't hit the target that you had. It's very easy to have that critic go, "Huh, you screwed up another thing. You'll never get anything right. You're never going to figure this out. All those people you see online that have it figured out, you're not one of them. You're never going to be one of them. Blah, 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 blah," right? Okay,
Yes.
maybe that's just mine, but
No. I'm
yeah,
like, "Wait,
right?
are you
Yeah,
reading my notebooks?"
no, no. So when the critic gets chatty like that, like if you were to call me and be like, "John, man, I just had this marketing thing go off and it missed the target." There's no way I would say to you, and if I called you, Megan, and like told you that happened, there's no way you'd say to me like, "Well, of course you screwed that up again, you big dumb dummy," right? You wouldn't say that to another person,
Nope.
but we talk to ourselves like that all the time. So the way to interrupt the critic when they just start ranting is be like, "Wait a minute, what would I say to a friend here? How would I address a friend?" You'd probably be like, "Man, that's tough. I know you worked really hard on it. Do you want to vent about it, or do you want to tell me what happened and we can start coming up with a plan?" That interrupts the script of the critic and moves us into that seeker mentality of awareness and curiosity.
Right. And action.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there are all these benefits to being aware, right? Like you can move towards your real goals, you can shift out of these disempowering narratives. Why wouldn't somebody want to be aware? Why would they go for their phone instead?
Yeah. So the ironic thing about overthinking, perfectionism, procrastination is at the root of all of them is actually fear. So the reason why we reach for our phone when we know we should be applying for that job or sitting down and putting in the 20 minutes we committed to write our book, the reason why we grab the phone is because it's a defense mechanism. We know if we sit down and maybe write that book, or we know if we send that job application in, we might actually put part of ourselves that are very near and dear to us out into the world. And one of the core fears of humans is to be ostracized. And, so we equate with showing our true selves. If we don't have the reps doing that, is, oh my gosh, if I put myself out there and people see the real me and it's rejected, I'm going to be alone. And that's like terrifying to
Yeah.
people,
Uh-huh.
right? So when we procrastinate, when we overthink, when we get stuck in perfectionism, which is just, fear dressed up in a fancy suit, right? we're,
Yeah.
all we're doing is delaying putting ourselves out there because we're trying to protect ourselves. So that's
Right.
that's the root of what's actually happening. So the question to ask yourself when you're picking your phone up is, what am I actually scared of? If I
Ooh.
sit down and work on my book for 20 minutes, what am I scared of happening?
Yeah. And sometimes I think even for myself, just saying that fear out loud, it it dissolves some of its power over me
Sure.
already. I remember one time I was talking to somebody and they were like, "What are you afraid will happen?" I'm like, "I'm afraid I'll be hated and I'll be kicked out and I'll have to go live in the woods and I'll be eaten by wolves." And they're like,
Right?
"Are you listening to yourself?" I'm like, "I know it's
Yeah.
not going to happen. The likelihood of that is so low."
Right.
That I don't know why I'm making decisions from this place of I might be eaten by wolves.
Yeah.
I don't even think there are wolves in Utah. But anyways, so it's like so unfounded that
Sure.
sometimes when you just say it out loud, I'm scared of this, you can be like, really? That's where we're making our decisions from.
Right. Right. And that's where our feelings and emotions and our experiences, rightly so, color our perception of reality. So one of the key phrases that one of my coaches told me over the years that stuck with me. He's when I was spiraling on something. We were on a call and I was like, same thing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. I'm gonna be eaten by wolves. He's like, dude. he said, he said, what you need to do is you need to separate the data from the drama, my friend. And I went, and he's like, separate the facts. Like write down the facts, and then write down the stories you're telling, and see where they don't line up.
Yeah. That's a powerful practice.
Yeah.
When we can take all the drama out of it it just becomes something to deal with, not even a problem. It
Mhm.
just becomes something that needs to be dealt with. Like we'll figure it out another way. Okay, that way didn't work.
Mhm.
Let's try something else. Let's do something else. Let's have a different approach. But it's our stories and our internal drama that makes it this like
Oh, yeah.
big thing that we can't overcome.
Yeah, and I see it all the time with my clients. Like, I remember I was talking with one of my clients in January one year, and it was, like, halfway through the month, and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" He's like, "Man, things are awful." I'm like, "Well, okay. What's happening?" They're like, "Our numbers are down, like, we're way off target, like, we're nowhere close to where we were last year, like, this is a disaster." It's, like, January 14th. I'm like, "Okay, hang on a second." So, when I looked at the calendar, and I know that, the business they have, they only make money when they're in the office, right? There's no online stuff. It's a completely in-person business. I said, "I'm looking at your schedule from last year and this year." I said, "Do you realize that just the way New Year's Day lined up, you've been in the office like 30% less than you were last year at this time?" "Oh, no, I didn't realize that." "Do you also realize you're gonna be in the office later, like, just the way the days are shaking out?" So if we normalize the data with that, what do you see? They're like, "Oh, we're actually doing much better than last year." It's like, right? Like, but they had this story like, "Oh my gosh, like things are falling apart. Like the wheels
Yeah.
are coming off finally. This is it.
This is it.
This
Yeah.
is it. We're not recovering."
That probably highlights like an internal fear though that they've got
Mhm.
somewhere in the back of their mind that they're going to hit that point
Yeah.
of this is the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
And so that is probably something that to deal with at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that highlights the fact of where it's like, okay, what's the data actually say?
Right.
Like what and as a test engineer, like that was our job was to gather the data to make sure whatever we were working on did its thing before it needed to do it, in real life
Yeah.
to get that data.
So this is an interesting like companion to awareness of like being aware of the actual truth of things, the
Mhm.
actual state, the data, the facts before you. My coach would say like if you whatever you can film with a camera, like
Mm.
this is what the actual thing is. That's how you take the story out of it. Is if you can film it with a camera, if you can, capture it, that is what we're actually working with. So it's
Oh,
being aware
absolutely.
of the two things, the
Mhm.
story that you're telling about the things that are happening and knowing the difference. So that was a really unexpected companion. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that piece that just came through there. So
Yeah.
if you were to if so as wrapping this up, if you were to give somebody like the biggest benefit that they could receive by being aware, what would you say that is?
It enables you to cut through the static that
Tell me more.
winds up that winds up in our head because as we're going through life, and as we're adulting through life, like there's no shortage of information coming at us. Like from our family, from the kids' schools, from if we work online, like you name it. Like there's no shortage of information. So it can be very hard to figure out what the next right step is just because there's so much information to sift through. So I developed my HITS framework, which is to help people cut through all that noise and static. And the H in HITS, HITS, is halt. Going back to how we started this conversation, you just need to
Yeah.
halt. Like just pump the brakes for a moment and give yourself some space to really see what's going on. Because again, movement doesn't equal progress. So sometimes we just need to halt and just be like, let me observe what's going on around me. And the I in HITS is identify what's important. Because if we can just pause and just start getting down on paper, like what is going on, and identify what's the immediately important task, that's the key. Because there's lots of important stuff on our to-do list, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes that thing that really needs to be done next is not the most pleasant. So what do? We distract ourselves. We
We
pick
pick
up
up
our
our
phone.
phone.
Yeah, we do. We do maybe, the other nine things that are nowhere near as important, immediately important, and we be like, oh, hey, look at me, I did nine things. It's like, yeah, but dude, you missed you missed a really important thing next. So if we can identify that and then just adopt the idea of I just need to take action. That's the T in the HITS framework. Take action. And there's General Colin Powell had a rule. He called it his 40-70 rule. He said, when you're a leader, and by the way, let me just normalize whoever's listening to this, you're a leader. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't have a giant corporate team behind you. Like, if you're listening to this, like, you're a leader, like someone's looking up to you. He said, leaders a lot of times will, sometimes try to make a decision with too little information, less than 40%. That's reckless. If they try to wait for perfect decisions and all the information, he's like, that's too slow. So as a leader, lean into the fact that you have the experience to take the next right step once you identify it with 40 to 70% of the information. So just take action. And then the way to really move the needle forward is the S in HITS. And that is set a deadline. Like, just give yourself a deadline, because there's so much power in specificity. Like, just saying like, I'm going to start working out someday is different than saying like, you know what I'm going to do? Starting tomorrow, I'm going to walk for 10 minutes, 3 days a week. That's powerful. That gives you a deadline. That gives you something specific to measure against. So halt, identify immediately important, take action, and then set a deadline to really move the needle forward.
Right. I love that. It's so actionable and memorable and doable. And I would add, when you set a deadline too, be like super specific,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like binary. Did you do it or did you not? Like, I'm going
Yeah,
to go for a 10-minute walk after lunch, you know, on
absolutely.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that
Yeah,
way I could call in, be like, hey, did you do it? It's 2
yeah,
p.m. I know you've had lunch.
yep. Bonus
Um,
points if you hold yourself accountable to someone who loves you enough to hold you accountable.
right. To give you a
Yeah.
little bit of crap for not
Mm-hmm.
following through.
Yeah, or be there to high five you when you do.
That too. Okay, great. Thank you so much for being on
Yeah, you're
breakthrough
welcome.
mode today and sharing your HITS framework and your experience and your stories with us. I am so grateful that you are here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan.
Um, and for everyone else, I totally love you. Bye for now.